Thank you so much for your time. I'm very excited to meet you. From my perspective, content precedes you. So, first discovered you on, well, not that I discovered you, the algorithm presented you to me on TikTok with some what I felt to be very creative, artsy, dabbling in philosophical videos that you made where you had a dialoguing structure, a discussion with, you represented what seemed to be your perspective, and you seemed like yourself in contrast or in, what's the word I'm looking for? A dialectical kind of structure with a shadow version of yourself being kind of antagonistic. Right, exactly, the shadow. Uh, and then, you kind of just came on and off my radar algorithmically. I was not doing anything with content production at that time. This is some time ago. And then since I have been, I had at some point made the decision to make a YouTube channel, start writing essays, the expressive release. Decided that I wanted to start talking with people to make content instead of doing just something out of my own head in my apartment, our house. Um, yeah, so I reached out to you, and now I'd love to talk with you kind of about, I guess, broadly, like what you're interested in, a little bit of background, whatever you're comfortable sharing to kind of like set the context of what you care about. And I'd love to talk with you about your project. Um, yeah, so
Sure. Well,
take it
firstly,
away.
thank you so much for. Firstly, I'm incredibly flattered that you'd like to speak to me, and that was a very complimentary description of my videos. So thank you very much. My name is Jack Lawrence. I am predominantly known online through making, as you say, philosophically inclined content on TikTok. Although I do a few bits and pieces on other platforms as well. My background, as it relates to my videos, so I studied an undergrad in physics, and I did some philosophy of science modules in that. I then did a master's in the philosophy of physics, which was, I sometimes joke, it was half theoretical physics, half talking about it. But we also did some pure philosophy for philosophy there as well. So some metaphysics I did, and some just yeah, more broader philosophy of science aside from pure philosophy of physics, and we can get into that distinction if you'd like. And then I sort of fell onto TikTok in the way that a lot of people did when the COVID pandemic happened. I was at home, had a really good camera that I picked up because previously my main creative outlet was doing improv comedy on stage,
Mm.
and I'd purchased this camera to film our shows. So I was at home, thought I had good piece of equipment. Why not make videos for a year and see how it goes? And I promised myself to do it for a full year. Like I started one day, I thought, here we go, gonna make a. I called it a year of bad art, a year of making bad videos because I'd never done video making before. So
Mm-hmm.
I anticipated they would suck. And in the 51st week of that 52-week experiment, I had a video where I stitched Hank Green on the philosophy of time, and that took off. And I sort of just kept with TikTok from there, and that's sort of
Mm-hmm.
sequence of events followed that, and we're now talking. So yeah, thank you again for
And
having
we're
me.
now talking. I am, after that introduction, I think more excited to speak with you than before. I hope that shows, that comes across, uh, because I think we have some shared interests. So I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I started my
Oh,
freshman year of
close.
school at Iowa State University in physics, in the physics department. I had taken some dual credit in
Nice.
high school, so I jumped straight into quantum physics, and that and its lab
Good stuff.
I hit a breaking point. It was like what do they call that? Like a filter class. It filtered me out. I was in a dorm with a lot of people in engineering, and they seemed to be thriving. They enjoyed their work. There's a lot of money too in engineering at Iowa State University, much more than there is in physics, because there's some links to like businesses in the state of Iowa. Um,
Cool.
and so I made the switch, and that my life kind of went a different direction. But that's where I started. So the philosophy. So you have a master's degree. You got a master's in the philosophy
I
of
have a master's
physics.
in the philosophy of physics. Yes,
That is impressive.
that is
Why
correct.
did you? What could have possibly possessed you to choose to get a master's in the philosophy of physics?
Yeah, because I wanted to get a job at the philosophy of physics factory like everyone else. I was frustrated during my undergrad at the fact that, at least for my studies in physics, but when I've spoken to other people who've done physics degrees, they've shared the same sentiments with me. which is that I felt, I get why this is the case, we were really just being trained in applied mathematics. We weren't really being trained in science or physics. And for me, the distinction is, are we actually thinking about what's actually going on? And there was one moment that sort of epitomized this. In my first year, undergrad, we were doing special relativity. It's third term. I was incredibly psyched. I was thinking, finally, we're getting to the good stuff. E equals mc squared, time dilation, space. Yes, I'm freaking ready for this. This is what I want to study. And we were about 6 lectures in. The lecturer had been doing it for 15, 16 years. He was an old hat. And I remember one time he was talking about some case of some spaceship going past a planet at 88% speed of light or something like that. And he turned around to us and he said, don't think about what's actually going on. Just do the maths. And I saw the 400 or so odd people in the lecture hall sort of just nod along, go, yeah, that makes sense. And I remember sitting there incredulous going, what do you mean? Don't think about what's actually going on. That is what I am here for. That's our job, dude. I understand what he meant because it's very counterintuitive, these sort of situations in special relativity, and that maths should ultimately be your guide before you develop an intuition. But it was the case that throughout the exams and lab work and everything else, there was just a sense of actually we're not really spending time thinking about this. We're being thrown lots of different models of reality and just being tested on how competent we are at using them, which is an important skill set. Don't get me wrong. But it was missing that sense of what is going on. And doing a master's in the philosophy of physics at least gave me the opportunity to take, I think, a step back from all of that. And having now been informed by an undergrad in physics, meaningfully say, okay, well, what do we actually mean by time? Because time as a quantity appears in lots of different models of reality, but it behaves very differently. And so, what are we talking about? Can we reconcile these? So that was why I wanted to think more deeply around questions of reality, having been informed by an undergraduate study in physics. Yeah.
In your adult life, have you had many interactions with children? I will explain the question.
Yeah. There are kids in my extended family. Yeah.
So you I'm sure have noticed that children are really good at asking why and in repetition, to the futile end of our ability to answer that question. Do you think that on some fundamental
Child.
level,
I'm a child.
well,
Sorry.
maybe we all are. So, do you in that it sounds to me, you're articulating a specific experience where you wanted to keep asking why, and the answers from the authority figure stopped, which I think is a common experience for children. Are you still? Do you think that's still kind of some a valid description of what is going on, or what that was like at that time, or does that description not really apply?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. I think it was more just, it wasn't that the professors or my lecturers or what have you, my tutors, dismissed these questions as unimportant. It was simply that the undergraduate program I was at wasn't catered to discuss those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And what we call physics, in my head, physics is the using the methods of. I mean, these are blurry terms to begin with, right? Like physics blurs into chemistry, which blurs into biochemistry and biology and everything
Yep.
else.
Yep. Yep.
But to me, at least, the essence of science as a whole is understanding the external world, insofar as we think there is one, the objective reality, right? And at least within the physics undergraduate program I did, we achieved that purely by means of looking at historic theories and solving equations in these applied circumstances. And that was, to me, just, it struck me as quite narrow. So it wasn't that I was questioning, going, I think Maxwell's electromagnetism equations are wrong. Because I would understand that the other thing about learning physics and many aspects of science is you're taught one thing in one year, which is actually a simplification. And the next year they go, hey, you know what we just told you? That was kind of a lie. It's actually more complicated. Here's the real situation. And you go, cool, thanks. And then you go to the next year and they go, hey, you know what we told you last year? Yeah, that was actually another
Right.
simplification. This
Right.
is the
There's
real
another
situation.
level. Yep.
And yeah, by no means do I think I hit the sort of the limit or the most modern form of these theories. It was more I wanted a space to explore uh, a more holistic view of
Mm-hmm.
physics, if you like, and this bleeds into other questions of just questions of evidence. If we, I'm not sure if you recall, there was a paper I think it came out in 2012, and it was redacted, but it was a paper from one of the CERN labs, which I think it had neutrinos going slightly faster than light. I think it was neutrinos, and
Okay. No,
there
I
was
have
this
not
big
heard of
kerfuffle.
this.
Do you recall that? It was published it. I think someone lost their job over it eventually because they found that there was an error with, I think it ended up being an electrical cable was looking, which caused the data to seem like these neutrinos had gone faster than light. But lots of papers came out around it. But I remember at the time thinking, hey, this is really interesting. On what grounds do we dismiss these anomalous results? Because no one at the time really believed these things had gone faster than light. But that's interesting, right? And knowledge generation in the context of physics, when we have all these different big research programs, was also something I wanted to learn about. So yeah, this is a very long-winded way of answering your question. I think there's a certain sense of not necessarily rejecting authority, although yeah, I think I don't think I'm the type to be satisfied with just it is this way, don't ask any more questions. But it was more just the program itself wasn't broad enough to satisfy my curiosities, and the masters at least gave me a space to ask those questions more broadly.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I did not mean to imply rejection of authority as the primary motivation of the question. Curiosity, like a childlike curiosity. So I apologize if that had come
Yeah,
across.
yeah.
And
No.
fair enough.
Out of curiosity, I think is a compliment. So no. So don't worry. No
So
offense.
then, going on into your master's, and then eventually I want to tie this to the ultimate question about your education, which will be like, how have you applied it since? But if I may, going on into your master's program, then did you go all the way, with kind of maybe like a religious bent to creation, and consider like the Kalam cosmological argument, and ask questions like, okay, so what came before the Big Bang? Or how did you apply this kind of curiosity in your master's? What direction did you go when you were able to take it to that next level?
So I did a master's program at Oxford, and it was fairly structured. We were examined on four different dissertations that we submitted, and one of these had to be, I think two of these had to be on a problem to do with the philosophy of physics. So it was a technical problem. I wrote, one of mine was about the simultaneity criterion, which, if you don't know what that is, or anyone listening doesn't know what that is, that's basically, it turns out that Einstein's relativity, one of the axioms that he built a theory out of is the idea that light moves at the same speed in all frames of reference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you look at that in a bit more depth, it's not that light moves at the same speed in all frames of reference, it's the two-way speed of light is the same in all frames of reference, which is to say that the time it takes from light going from A to B and then back to A has to average out to C. It's not that it has to be C to A to
Mm-hmm.
B and C to B to A, it has to average out to C. Which means that you could, in theory, build up a theory of reality where light goes slightly faster in one direction, as long as it's proportionally slower in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
And you can build up, and you can rewrite all of like electrodynamics using an anisotropic speed of light, but the observations always turn out to be the same. So I wrote about the question of, okay, is it therefore at all meaningful to talk about light being going at different speeds in different directions if it turns out that the observations all turn out to be the same? Is that a scientific discussion at this point? So I wrote
Mm-hmm.
about that. I also wrote about something to do with the H theorem, which was a sort of precursor to entropy. H was done by Ludwig Boltzmann.
Mm-hmm.
I also wrote about the role of explanations in science. That was a broader philosophy of science question. And then I wrote about the metaphysics of time, which was on the A, B, and C theories of time, which I
Mm-hmm.
can expand
Mm-hmm.
on what those are. That was the sort of while there were lots of different lectures and seminars on different topics, that those are the topics I focused in on my business.
Very interesting. Gotcha. I'm trying to think where I want to pick up on that.
Yeah, so that's a bunch of different doors, but
Yeah,
yeah,
there
that's
are
I,
there
I,
are,
did, I
and
did
what's
talk about creation. Yeah.
I think maybe what's behind door number three would be interesting to me. That being with the if I may dig, I don't want to go down
Yeah, you
too
can ask
deeply
me
on this
anything you
whole.
want, man. Yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate
You're
it.
in the driver's seat. Take me wherever. Yeah.
With respect to the theories of time, maybe this is an interesting question. When I have given a little bit of consideration to my very small understanding of the A, B, and C theory of time, I find myself responding with a position that is very similar to how I find myself responding to the arguments you might hear that simulation theory, that all of what we experience, all of reality, may be indexed as a simulation from some higher order technological, superpower. Which is to say, and that position is that if we could never know, is it worth our time to consider? So I find that although in so many other domains and to so many other questions, I have a curious questioning mind. When I hit the what I imagine, and I may be wrong about this, but what I imagine is a possible epistemological limit. My genuine inner reaction is, well, then who cares? So
Yeah.
I totally dismiss simulation arguments when they come up, and they don't really. But in casual conversation, someone might say, "Oh, well, this we all live in a simulation, anyways," and I find it
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
ridiculous. And I think I find theories of time which are so different from any that we could possibly experience, or they suggest that there are modes, there's directionality to time that we will never experientially know. I find within my curious mind sort of takes a back seat, and my skeptical mind comes to the front and says, "Let's talk about something more pragmatic." How would
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
address that? Or are the A, B, and C
You
theory of
certainly
time
sound like an
discussion?
engineer.
Why would why what room is there to continue to pursue that line of questioning?
Great question. So I think at least, let's put it this way, I don't stay up late at night thinking about the different theories, metaphysical theories of time, and which one of them becomes true. I think the utility, at least in that debate, for me, was a few things. One, it was a belated epiphany to me when we were doing seminars on it. I think the lecturer, maybe in the first one, said, okay, so time is obviously a key component of our experience here, our conscious experience, the passage of time. Most people understand what that is. And we all sort of know what we mean by the present moment. And there's the sense of the present moment is moving forwards. And yet, this thing which seems to us to be the most real is not present in any of our theories of reality at all. Is that not kind of sus? And I went, oh, actually, yeah, that is a little bit sus. Now, obviously, there are explanations for that as to perhaps why we perceive an error of time, and that's to do with entropy and everything else. And it ties in with the mystery of consciousness at a certain point of, yeah, why is there a present moment? And you can start to ask questions of, and obviously there are sci-fi novels that consider this, of I could imagine myself experiencing time at twice the rate that I do right now. I could, fast forward on a moment. Why? What dictates the rate of my experience of time? And then you end up with saying, well,
Mm-hmm.
okay, maybe it's the speed of which my brain processes things. But that references time as well. So, okay, am I just sort of, are we doing a sort of computational argument? It feels like you could double everyone's, if there's a subjective experience of time which is predicated on, let's say, the speed of computation, we could that, and there's like a sort of qualia rate that is linked to that. We could double that for every life form and every thing on the planet. Why not? What? Why? But we can almost imagine that, of saying, okay, you have X computing power in your brain, you experience time this way. You have half X, then it feels like time's going twice as fast because it's slower, and you're like, oh wow, that went really quickly. But you could change all those ratios, and everything would still be consistent. So
Mm-hmm.
what? There is clearly some subjective tie in here. Uh, then you look at our physical theories of Einstein's block universe, whereby there's no really any difference between the past and the future, and lots of our theories of physics are time symmetric, and depending on who you speak to and your interpretation of quantum mechanics, you might think that there's super determinism and every possible outcome has already occurred. And I think that deepens the mystery. And you suddenly go, wait a second. To me, I I agree with you when I hit something like this simulation argument, which to me is sort of like a form of the transcendental argument of basically God did it and you can't know, which I'm also disinclined to think about further. But I don't. I guess yeah. I suppose in some sense I'm agreeing with you. I also walk away when I feel like you can't make any meaningful headway, but I I guess I was interested in it because if we, yeah, going back to even like what drew me to the masters in the first place, of asking the more broader question of can we use physics to describe reality? Oh yeah, this thing which seems to be one of the most real things we experience. is not present in any of our theories of reality, and that's kind of perplexing. I think I haven't even answered your actual question there. I've just rambled, so I don't know if you actually. Sorry.
That's perfectly all right. Are you familiar with the Nietzsche's suggestion that we may
Eternal
live
recurrence,
our
baby. Yeah.
lives? Yes, yes, we may live our lives exactly as they are, over and over and over again. Do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think his position would be on which is the true description of the nature of time, or would that be that's
I mean,
too far fetched to guess?
far be it from me to know the mind of Nietzsche. I suppose the one that's closest to
ChatGPT might
his
know. I might put this
is
into the
I'm
bot and
sure it
see
would
what
be
it
happy to
thinks.
wax lyrical. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess he would be inclined to do something like the block universe theory, the B or C. Maybe he would go, yeah, maybe sometimes we experience recurrence backwards. I guess he's a B theorist because he believes that there's a certain direction of time. You just keep
Hmm.
pressing play. Maybe it's like it's an
And it's a loop
Ouroboros
rather
block
than a right,
universe. Yeah,
rather than a
yeah,
line.
yeah. And so, yeah. I guess he would lean that way. But
And my understanding is that
there's
that
any argument.
suggestion was more literal than it was metaphorical. You know, a lot of people interpret Nietzsche metaphorically because that's intuitive, but my understanding is that that may have been a literal suggestion, a that for us to consider that that may be the case of the state of reality in our lives.
Yeah, I must admit, I've read some Nietzsche. I'm not so much of an expert that I could say, or I could even have a strong position on whether it was taken as a metaphor or a literal construction. He, I think he was better as a destructive philosopher of criticizing others than he was a constructive philosopher coming up with his own
Mm-hmm.
notions. Obviously, they're very effective, and we talk about the will to power and all that. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's powerful both ways. I can't really say an opinion on that, really. I'm sorry.
So segueing, so you make very creative videos now, uh, or at least they come
Thanks.
across my feed now. Have you found that you've been able to apply your education in physics and the philosophy in physics to this creative, you know, expressive engine, or do you find that you've made a personal, you know, a change since you left school and are now doing whatever you're doing?
Yeah, so I got my start on TikTok making videos about physics. So in a sense, they sort of bled into it, and I sort of went physics, talking more then about the philosophy of physics and philosophy of science because that's sort of a more niche topic and
Mm-hmm.
obviously something I care about. And then I suppose it shapes my thinking. It, I couldn't necessarily draw a through line between, say, one of the papers I did in my master's and one of the videos I did last month. I think in the most meta sense, the way in which there's a really nice line I read recently in this book called A Short Stay in Hell. It's a fantastic short story. And it opens with, and I'm going to butcher it, but this main character, and it's not really a spoiler because it's the first paragraph, or the second, but the character laments that he's lost the person he loves, and it's kind of funny how you can spend a small time with someone and they can change the topology of your thinking, which I thought was a really elegant line, or something to the effect of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the same has been for my studies of physics and the philosophy of physics, in that there's a certain sense in which I think it shapes how I consider ideas. In I am not so even like a purely empirical lens, but I guess I'm trying to understand things in a sort of more sort of model sense and sort of axioms of consequences. And even when I consider philosophical ideas, I'm kind of really using a sort of Popperian falsification, critical rationalism type of idea. Like I think it's good to be exposed to different ideas that possibly undermine your own. That's either going to lead you to better ideas that are close to the truth, or it's going to strengthen your ideas. And I know
Mm-hmm.
not all claims of philosophy are truth claims. So to tie this back to your actual question, I think yes, in some way, in that my education shapes everything I do. I don't use physics ideas directly in a lot of my videos. Sometimes it sort of informs my writing a little bit, but usually there's a much tighter through line between something I've read, some conversation I've had, some experience I've had, leads to a script, leads to a video, than say my physics background.
Picking up on the idea of falsification, I think that that may be why now I am trying to get more dialogues going. It is a skill that has to be, it is like a sharp blade that needs to be maintained as sharp in the mind to be able to hold and consider contrasting ideas at the same time. But when you have another human being who can be the voice of the idea that is in opposition to yours, you can use, it's so much more effective. At least I would say for myself, I
100%.
get so much more out of
No, look,
dialogue.
we think in groups. We think in groups, definitely. And very rarely in the history of any intellectual field has someone come along, act as an island unto themselves, and advance things. And this is when I did a module on the history of science. This is something they were at pains to say. I mean, you look at Darwin coming up with his theories, or even Einstein, and or any of the theories of quantum mechanics. Yes, these people, and many times are extraordinary and came up with some new innovation and took a leap. But it's what Newton said. He stood on the shoulders of giants. These people were in active academic communities, or at least had access to these sorts of dialogues, which advanced their thinking. So yeah, I think thinking in groups and with other people is far more efficient. I think very rarely would you find someone who says no. I'm much better splitting up my mind into various different pieces. Sorry, I even cut you
Mm-hmm.
off there. I
Mm-hmm.
was probably actually going something, but yeah.
I see your scientific background coming out in your content, especially. So I've watched many of the videos that you've posted on YouTube this past week, specifically in preparation for speaking with you. My
Thanks.
work is of a kind that, there's planning and there's execution, and when I'm in execution phase, I can sort of plug in, get my work done, but be, enjoying the whatever there is to be gained from listening to the ideas of others via the internet. And I think one of your most recent video, it may be your most recent video on YouTube, was the problem of induction. And I was surprised because, well, one, I had never heard of that before. So your take was my initial on the topic, but it seems to me that problem is, I mean, it's a philosophical discussion of a, I will use the term again, an epistemological limit of the scientific project. Um, what was your motivation to make that video for those that haven't seen it? And what is your take on the problem of induction?
So, for those who aren't aware of the problem of induction, it's attributed to David Hume, and essentially it talks about the issue, or at least its modern understanding, shall we say, is basically saying when we make scientific predictions, typically we're using past evidence to inform future events. And this uses a type of reasoning called inductive reasoning. So this is different from deductive reasoning, which is often, you know, you, you see them in syllogisms, where classic one is all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. If the preceding statements are true, then the
Mm-hmm.
conclusion must be true. Inductive reasoning is more associative. So every time I've touched this hot pan, my finger really hurts. I therefore think it's a rule that if I touch a hot pan, I will hurt my finger, and that's now like a law, a rule. You've made an inductive claim, and you can do this for all sorts of things. Of every time I heat up water, I see it boil. Every time 24 hours goes by, I see the sun rise again, or something like that. And the problem is that inductive reasoning doesn't guarantee its conclusions. So there are times where you might touch a hot pan, but because you're wearing gloves, it doesn't hurt. Or if you go to the South Pole 6 months of the year, 24 hours pass by and the sun doesn't rise. And so this is for many a problem, because we would like to think that scientific predictions and scientific knowledge is special and rigorous, and that the more evidence you have gives greater credence to your future claims. But if we're using a kind of reasoning which is inherently maybe not necessarily faulty, but doesn't give that sort of guarantee that we would hope, is this, as you so eloquently put it, a sort of epistemological limit, like with the whole scientific enterprise. And there are various different delightful thought experiments you can give to illustrate this problem. one thought experiment that I didn't include in the video, which I'll talk to you about here, I quite like it. I can't remember which philosopher came up with it, but I know David Deutsch discussed it in a chapter of his book, The Fabric of Reality. And it goes like this. It's quite a fun form of the problem of induction argument. So imagine that you are standing with a friend on the highest balcony of the Eiffel Tower. You're in France having a good time. And you and your friend are chilling there, you're admiring the view, and then your friend decides to stand up onto the ledge, and he says that he's going to take a step off in a couple of minutes. And you say, please don't do that. You will fall to your death, because gravity. And your friend says, well, according to your theory of gravity, I will do that. And your theory of gravity has lots of evidence. But I've just come up with a new theory of gravity. My theory of gravity says that gravity is going to behave exactly the same way it does for your theory, Einstein's theory, except in 2 minutes when it won't apply to me. I think in 2 minutes I will be exempt from the laws of gravity as they pertain to everything else. I will be exempt, and I will float calmly, gently down to the ground. And you say, that's absurd. Why would you think that? You've got no evidence that this is going to happen. And he says, quite the contrary. I have exactly the same amount of evidence for my theory as you do yours. My theory predicts it's going to work exactly the way yours does. Every experiment that's verified your theory has verified my theory. Why should I not step off? And the philosopher who came up with this basically gave the scenario of, like, you now have to try and convince this guy to step down. What reasoning do you have? And if inductive reasoning is all you have, aren't you kind of screwed? You can't really talk this guy down, because you want to say, well, there's been no experiment that shows anything like this happened. And he goes, yeah, my theory doesn't say there should be an experiment that goes like this happens. And you have this delightful back and forth. David Deutsch offers a solution to this, of course, and other philosophers have criticized it. Do I think it's a problem? Yes, I think it's there is a certain limit insofar as we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and there are certain ways in which science is practiced that I think precludes us from predicting certain kind of events. But I don't think that. I think it's a problem, a quote unquote problem with the scientific enterprise that we can live with. I don't think it's catastrophic to every prediction. I'm not sure if that's a sufficient answer.
Right.
I can elaborate more on
I would respond to that.
Of that
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You suggested, if I may, and this is not to put the weight or the responsibility of an answer to the problem of induction, on your shoulders, but just to see what you think. You suggested, as an example, the theory or the rule that when I touch a hot stove, my hand will burn and it will hurt, can be disproven by touching a hot stove with a glove or some sort of inner layer. And then you had suggested, the rise of the sun every morning for every day of our lives suggests that the sun will rise tomorrow. But if you're in a different position in the world than you've ever been, the sun will behave differently. These two examples, to my mind, and so maybe I'm misunderstanding, it's a bait and switch. So it's not running the same experiment. Something has changed. In the first experiment of touching a hot stove and it hurts, there is no protection for my hand. In the second experiment, there is. So the conditions are just different. Why would we expect to have a similar result for a arguably complete, if one thing is different, it's completely different, a completely different scenario. And with the sun rising, why, it seems like being in a different place.
Fair enough. Let me give you a better example. Let's say you grow up on the equator and you have some concept of temperature of water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing this, let's say, 1,000 years ago. So you have refrigeration, right? And the average temperature has never dropped below 10 degrees. And you have a concept of temperature. I've said to you, what happens when you lower the temperature of water another degree? And you said, well, every time we lower the temperature of water 1 degree, nothing happens.
You can't predict water, freezing.
Like you boil it.
Yep.
Yeah. And suddenly, you keep going, and suddenly, at a certain random, seemingly arbitrary point, the pattern really randomly changes, where you get this suddenly, it freezes, and you go, what? How could I have seen that happen? So that's an example of, in that situation, where inductive reasoning wouldn't have served you, because this thing which you've never experienced, you didn't even know there was a thing to experience, and you had no way of accessing these temperatures, whereby something would probably violated your inductive intuitions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can understand the concept of n minus one in this case, n plus one, where plus one means taking away a degree, because you've seen
Yep.
temperature at different degrees, and you don't know if at n plus 1,000 something will be fundamentally different. Sure, I see
Yeah.
similarities to like prime number generation. So people make, come up with formulas that are really good at generating prime numbers for ridiculously large inputs to that formula, but we keep running computers to keep checking bigger and bigger numbers because you can't prove it, in math, and I wonder if in physics, although I didn't go deep on physics in my education, I went deep on math. There is this idea of a proof, and as you said with deductive argument, with syllogisms, you know, if
Yep.
A and B and if A then B, then you're rock solid. There's no room for interpretation. It's just true. Uh, 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 I'm losing my train of thought. But with
It's
generation
proof
of
by
prime
induction.
number,
Yeah.
yeah. So does the problem of induction? It's a high bar. Philosophers have a very high bar for epistemology, for knowledge.
Well, let's put it in more mathematical terms. So, proof by induction in maths, as far as I'm aware, and you went deeper on this than I did probably, but my understanding is that because you can define the axioms for any number system you're in, when you say, hey, n plus 1, this is now going to work for all n, you know that's going to work for all n because you basically define that the rules are going to be the same at every integer, or whatever system you're using, right? So you can be assured of that. Now, let's say take the equivalent with boiling of water, assuming that the pressure
Sure.
is the
Yep.
same and all these other
Yep.
random
Yep. Yep.
factors,
Yep.
right? If H2O and like the weight of hydrogen and oxygen are the same, and what we mean by temperature is the same, then every time we boiled, we got water at 100 degrees today, it boiled. We boil at 100 degrees tomorrow, it boiled. Therefore, is it not always going to boil at 100 degrees? And sometimes I think the way to think about this is we do not know the laws of physics are going to be the same in all that way, right? Or there's not some other fundamental facet we're missing. We are blind to the
Mm-hmm.
informational considerations that we don't have. And I think that comes back nicely to the sort of Eiffel Tower example, where there is a sense in which, okay, sometimes there are these random state changes where, maybe after a certain amount of time, the rules of physics are going to change. That doesn't seem intuitive, and there's no reason to speculate on that. But again, all of our notions, if you look back at the history of science, there are times whereby we'll have a scientific theory which is successful. It makes predictions. It stipulates the existence of things which we think we can see and understand. And then we eventually turn around and go, actually, we don't think that exists at all. A great example of this is the theory of phlogiston, which I can't really say, phlogiston, which was sort of a precursor to the idea of oxygen. But people would burn stuff and they say, look, the
Mm-hmm.
stuff's coming out. You can see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
all that. So, yeah.
And now we have fire science, and such things inform how we prepare our emergency response systems, and thank goodness for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm trying to do on a project level understanding with writing essays and making content is trying to apply thinking from, well, I would say across domains. So, when I was young, I grew up on a farm. I went to
Cool.
church. I had a very basic American, primary education. Then I went to school and I was exposed to formal, maths and sciences, and my, kind of was exposed to something that I had never been exposed to before. I've always loved music. Even though I got my degree in engineering with a minor in mathematics, I took piano and French horn lessons while I was in school. Since I've graduated, even though I'm working professionally as an engineer, I have I'm not currently, but over the past couple of years, taken community college courses in biology and in psychology. I
That's
think
awesome,
that
man.
there is. Thank you. I am not trying to brag. The point I'm trying to make is I think there's a huge opportunity for what might emerge from extra domain dialectic. So when you
Dude, you need
suggested
to read
the
The Fabric of Reality like yesterday. Have you ever read this book?
no, by whom?
Yeah, it's by David Deutsch. He's the
By David
guy
Deutsch, and
who,
that's a name I've heard.
yeah,
But
yeah. So this book, the whole premise of this book, David Deutsch says, okay, the theory of everything. Lots of people want this holy grail of physics, which is some big equation. I don't care about that.
Yep,
He
yep,
says
yep.
what I will care about is taking our best theories from different domains and smashing them against each other. And he says at this moment in time, I'm going to now be looking at the implications of these four different fields on each other: quantum physics, epistemology, evolutionary biology, and computational science.
I'm
And he
taking
takes
this
these four
as a
domains,
note. You said the theory of everything. What was the name of the book?
the fabric of reality, the
The
fabric of reality.
Fabric of Reality by
I think it
David
was written
Deutsch.
in '94 or '96. And he's got a second book out now called The Beginning of Infinity. But you should start with the Fabric of Reality.
Thank you for the
It's
recommendation.
it is literally what you're talking about, where he says, let us take these different domains, the best ideas from these domains, and see, and let's rub them against each other and see what happens.
That
So
was maybe a jump to the abstract. I guess the example would be when you articulated the Parisian Eiffel Tower, example that where the problem of induction is the problem of convincing one person of something that is true was one of the content that I am consuming currently, and I have in totality previously, but it was a couple of years back, and I'm doing it again. Is the Robert Sapolsky uh, behavioral evolutionary kind of scientific lecture? He's is or was a Stanford professor, which university here in the states, and he suggests that there has been for a very, very, very long time the selective pressure on creatures like us who reproduce to carry to we strive to that are not consciously but in some sense a description of what we do is we strive to pass on copies of our genes further and further into the future. That's what came to mind in the sense that, and forgive me if this is a little bit morbid. I think the thought experiment is a little bit morbid inherently.
yeah.
If you can't convince this person of a truth that will keep them alive,
Mm.
then they will die, and that meme, the idea in their mind that led to the experiment that ends in their
Demise, yeah.
finitude demise, yeah, it will play out, and that idea will have less people in the world who believe it, and there will be an
Mm.
example for other thinking minds to know of and see, this is the kind of thing that results from this kind of idea, which is not. I don't think that's necessarily an answer to the problem of induction that's posed in the example. It is, but it is a I don't know, tangential, or you might say parallel, or you might say adjacent, response that is a bit sad, but I think kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's a nice explanation, or nice is perhaps not the best word, but it's an elegant, perhaps, explanation for why ideas that play around with induction don't proliferate as much, because yeah, there's sort of like a natural selection for people who don't take induction seriously. You could say that the standard inductive intuition is that all things have fallen all the time, so what are you talking about? And
Mm-hmm.
so and perhaps that's partly why induction is such a instinct for animals and us alike, and that's we draw patterns in many different areas of our lives where perhaps they shouldn't be drawn. So yeah, that's a I can't say I'm incredibly familiar with Sapolsky's work. I've seen a couple of lectures, I believe, but I do
He's
sometimes
cool. I
think
love
about
the way that
this
he
around.
communicates. He's a very articulate speaker, and he's fun. And I wish I was in his classroom when he was giving those lectures. It's just like he's such a delight of a communicator and I think educator. But I don't think he's doing
Yeah,
that
no,
anymore. My
definitely
understanding is he may be.
twinkle in his eye for sure. At least in the
Yeah,
times I've seen him speak. So
yeah.
I, yeah, I sometimes think about this. I guess it makes me a little bit nervous because what? Well, tell me what you think of this. As far as I'm aware, liberal countries and people who are are atheist as opposed to religious tend to have lower birth rates than ones which are religious countries, and
I've heard
people
this.
who are religious
Yes.
tend to have more children than
Yep.
atheists. And there is a high correlation between the views of someone and the views of their parents. And so there is a certain sense in which, like, oh yeah, maybe there's an evolutionary pressure against atheism and liberalism because all of these society, and like, you can argue that there are way too many other confounding variables to draw those conclusions, but one could potentially say that, oh, this is kind of worrying, and a sentence which still feels wild to say, but is empirically super sound, is that the more educated women get, the fewer kids they want, which is also kind of wild, right? And so this sort of sense of like, wait, is there like an evolutionary pressure against the education of women? That's nuts. And I guess I know you were saying it's not a refutation of the problem of induction, but uh, for me, there's a sense in which the truth, scientific truth, is not. It doesn't necessarily, and our knowledge of it doesn't necessarily need to be compatible with life in that sense, right?
Yeah,
I don't think we're
well,
built for
or
truth. So
Richard
yeah.
Dawkins suggested in a lecture that he gave and posted online from years ago, many years ago, that
Hmm.
perhaps the description that is the theory of evolution over the history of life on planet Earth will be fundamentally different from what the theory of evolution will say about the future of humanity. We may be
Yeah.
I don't think that there's any way one could argue that will be no theory of evolution moving forward. I think the theory of
Mhm.
evolution is in some sense a totality, like it as long as life is doing things and life exists at population levels where we can make descriptions of populations in terms of their birth rates and then make correlations with birth rates and death rates with activities of the members of the population. As long as things evolutionary are going on, there will be a theory of evolution. However, we may be, because of our advancement to a certain point in terms of our cognitive ability, our how human beings interact with the world, be just the future of our yeah of humanity may be fundamentally different than it has been for other life up to this point,
Mhm.
which is kind of an interesting idea.
Mhm.
I don't know.
No, it's fascinating, new frontier, and I mean, Lord knows it's hard enough to model what the hell's going on right now with all the world's complexity. So hopefully that complexity continues to continue, and then we need new exciting theories to understand it. But yeah,
Yeah. I told you I wanted to ask you about emotivism. So I listened to your conversation with, and I'm just like jealous of the guests that you've been
my
able
conversation with myself.
with
So,
Nick
oh yeah, with
Shackleton
who?
Jones.
Oh yeah, he's a friend of mine.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes. I was
He's a
I
great
was
guy.
just floored. Like that, you're talking to the kind of people I would love to speak with. Um, my
I
impression
mean,
of
he talked to him.
his
You should
argument,
message him. He loves talking about people. So yeah, yeah.
and I may. So whenever I encounter the position of someone that I like, it just I am left curious. That's kind of like
He's
I reached
super
out to
fun to
you.
talk to. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Would
He's
you
super fun to talk to.
say maybe I'm not. I don't know if it's fully appropriate for you to speak on his behalf, but would you say he's an emotivist and he makes an emotivist argument with his work and his position on all thinking being feeling fundamentally, or
Oh,
do you think
well,
it's just like
so
orthogonal?
I think there's two questions here. There's one which is, in the same way that say someone might go 1 + 1 = 2, independent of human thought, and there's a sort of transcendental truth to that statement. There may be a transcendental truth to the statement that say murdering an innocent person is wrong. Uh, does Nick have an opinion on that? I don't know. What I think, what I feel more comfortable in saying is that because he thinks that all cognition is emotionally laden or comes from an emotional place, and that the sort of thought feeling distinction is a myth, that he would probably say that he would be inclined towards emotivism in saying that it's not that moral statements are, we're not saying boo murder, we it's that every statement we say has some sort of boo yay or some flavor of feeling behind it. And so I guess he would almost be like dissolve emotivism in that he'd say this is kind of redundant because not only are moral statements emotional, every statement like comes from an emotional place. That would be my guess, although I probably put about a 50% chance that's close to what he thinks, because I would hesitate to say I can represent his views well.
So Mr. Jones approaches the domain of thinking and feeling from a more pragmatic, scientific perspective, and you would say maybe emotivism, which, to my understanding, was kind of bootstrapped by A.J. Ayer. Ayer is the author of an essay that I read on the topic. You would say maybe that's kind of a broader scope of inquiry in terms of the substance,
I think
the factual
Nick
basis of.
Shackleton Jones is his paradigm is that the thinking feeling distinction is a myth, and so he would
That's clear.
my guess is that he would say if we're looking at any claim that is being made, he's basically saying that descriptively what is happening in the brain, there's the same underlying neurological processes for a feeling as there is like cognitive thinking. He doesn't deny there are different brain areas or what have you, and he uses this to make various different philosophical implications. My guess is that yes, he would then go on to say that these same underlying drivers are behind moral statements as well. My guess is that he'd be agnostic towards some sort of transcendental moral truth from that, because I don't think within his paradigm there's any room for sort of transcendental access to truths like that.
So do you put your foot down on either side of this line? Would you call yourself an emotivist or not, or have you not considered?
So I'm not nearly as well read in this as many other people you can find online or in books. My hesitations, and maybe there are people who've dealt with these objections, is that I don't know what it would really mean for something to be transcendentally morally true or false. So if it were the case we lived in a universe where I think I can see in our universe that 1 + 1 = 2 transcendentally, and I think you can see that sort of like echoed down in things. If there's going to be like a platonic truth to that, I think you can make that argument. I don't know how the universe would be different for moral truths. I would probably say that I think moral truths. I guess I think I'm a constructivist. I think that's a school of thought. So I think that when people are saying murder is wrong, they might be saying boo murder, but they might be saying something slightly more complicated, where they're saying, look, we can't have murder in our society, otherwise it doesn't like sustain us and things will fall apart. So I think you can have true or false moral statements in cultural contexts. I think they're sort of contextually true or false. I have my own moral convictions. At the same time, I would tell you, if you would say, well, does that mean, Jack, that you think in some cases that you personally think that, say, pedophilia is justified? I personally don't think I could ever have that conviction, but I think I don't think I could ever have that conviction because of my upbringing and circumstances, and maybe for a bunch of like evolutionary reasons. I don't know. But
yeah, right. I mean, the
some
position on that might be just thank goodness that most people aren't most of the time, and you just have an attitude of gratitude about that, and then move on to the next thing.
But there might be some like alien species that has totally different, like, even like concepts of being to us, where there might be where we could like put on our ideas of like murder or whatever sort of crime or moral morally repulsive act, which they might think about it differently. So yeah, I guess I think moral notions are invented perhaps with good evolutionary reason, and then we build upon those into sort of like generalized laws. But I don't think they're. I'm also agnostic, so that's probably partly why I think it's easier if you have a theistic belief to say there's some sort of divine transcendental law.
Yeah, absolutely. I think emotivism is necessarily not deontological.
Not religious, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. But the reason why I'm hesitant to say emotivist is that I think it's kind of very patronizing. Of you're basically saying, hey, when you say murder's wrong, you're just expressing an emotion, man. I think you have to be a little bit more curious than that with statements. It's not on me to tell you what you're always thinking. So I just don't like that. I feel uncomfortable saying that.
Yeah. I don't know how scientific it is to. Well, okay. I'm having a constellation of ideas, and I need to figure out the most correct way in order to communicate them in. When you suggest like, when you say this is what you're actually saying. Well, people say lots of things, and we could survey the entire population of human beings on planet Earth and ask them, when you make a moral statement like murder is wrong, what do you really mean? Tell me everything that you mean by that. And then we could say, okay, well, whoever, whatever position has the most people that agree with it, that's the right position. If you're open to, I don't know, I don't think that's very scientific or philosophically robust, but I would say, if your criteria for a hesitancy to accept a transcendental moral realism is the thought experiment that a distant alien population may land fundamentally differently than most people on the answers to ethical questions. Um, that seems like, I don't know. This is what I'm
Well, So,
struggling
so,
with.
so maybe I expressed that really poorly. The example of an alien species for me is more to, I guess it's like a more absurd example of like moral relativism, right? Which is that different values are going to emerge in different contexts,
Yep.
and that's perhaps partly why I'm reluctant to declare that I have any sort of access to any transcendental truth. I think the reason why I don't believe in any sort of like moral realism, or I'm skeptical of that, is that I just don't know what it would look like. Like, show me a universe where moral realism is real, and show me a universe where values are constructed. Show me the difference. Is there any empirical
Mm-hmm.
difference? Okay, if not,
Mm-hmm.
then what do we mean? What do we mean? What are you saying? It's just unclear to me. So perhaps that's really what I mean by that.
Was there anything else that emerged from your conversation with Nick that you found particularly like intriguing or insightful, or that you would want to highlight for myself or viewers as like a curious and as someone who listened to that conversation and found that on this topic my curiosity was piqued?
Oh gosh, I've learned so much from Nick. I think so. What he spends most of his time doing is learning design and thinking about experiences and ways in which people learn. And he writes a lot on LinkedIn and makes videos on TikTok and other platforms. A lot of them are to do
Sure.
with learning. He also talks about philosophy as well. And so I think from him and his paradigm, it's changed the way in which I think about how I relate to emotion. So we talk in, I can't remember, I don't know where in the conversation. You'll have to check out the podcast or look at the stuff, which I encourage people to do. He also has a book, it's great. But he points out that a lot of what we retain is directly in proportion to, say, the emotional valency of our experience. And this ties in with quite nicely if you look at books around written by memory champions on how they memorize decks of cards or
Mm-hmm.
various different
Mm-hmm.
digits of pi, is that they will often sort of back hack their brains by using different circuits and by thinking in terms of the Loki method, which is LOCI or loci method, where
Mm-hmm.
they'll imagine walking through a space, or with decks of cards, they'll, as far as I'm aware, a classic technique is to assign some celebrity or someone you know to each card in the deck of in the suite, and then when you're looking at an order, sort of invent some kind of story when going through them. So you want to make these pictures vivid and emotional, and you want
Mm-hmm.
you want to have some sort of reaction to them. And so even you right now, when you're saying, "Hey, this piqued my interest. I recall this happening," Nick would be like, "Aha! You see, this is the
I'm
way we should be
articulating a
learning.
narrative
This is it."
structure. Yep.
You know, but you're taking a narrative structure, and crucially one that you emotionally reacted to. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
I think, and maybe this is a weird thing to say, but it strikes me that when I can maybe consciously try and open my sensitivity to situations to deepen how much I remember. So if I'm going to a party or if I'm with a friend, I will sometimes now, following that conversation, think to myself, let's see if I can have an emotional reaction to just like the scenery. Like, what can I really take in and breathe in here? Like, because I do think you can, you know this when you go off to a party or an event and you're in a kind of a grumpy mood and you're going in and you're sort of in a sort of equilibrium where you don't want to be disturbed one way or another because you sort of say like, all right, I'm going to stay in this mood as far as possible. And sometimes something can shake you out of that. But I think you can, at least I think I can, consciously open yourself and allow yourself to bend or to be moved a little bit more. And I've tried to do that a bit more in life, and I think it allows me to retain more, and it
You do. So you
heightens the
you
flavor
would
of life.
verify
So
that
yeah,
empirically through your experience.
I
Interesting.
would say, yeah, subjectively that's been true for me, but maybe I can't say I've done any hard experiment of, how many megabytes of information do I recall when I'm,
Right. I don't think anyone would
you know.
suggest that human memory
Yeah, no,
is
no, 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 no. But
infinite.
I'm
Well,
caveating it, right? Because there's confirmation bias and all these other things. So Lord knows I'm fallible, but at least it makes sense. I think his arguments are persuasive. It's enriched my quality of life a little bit, so that's something I've taken away. So yeah, open yourself up, you remember more. There, 16.
I have noticed when you are wrapping up. This is just an observation. I'd love to reflect it to you and then see what you think. When
Oh God.
you are wrapping up a long train of thought, uh, especially one where you've had to, I would say, like, put your foot down on a position, or I've asked you to, and you've tried to, make a forthright claim. You wrap up with sort of a, well, I mean, maybe, or what do you think, or it could be this way, but who knows? Like a forfeit of confidence,
Confidence.
which is not to say you seem unconfident, but to the point of maybe from earlier, like philosophers have a very high bar for saying this is what I believe or this is true. I'm observing that in your communication style. What's going on there? Do you agree? Do you know what I'm talking about? Why what is
I am
the
unaware
hesitancy
of
to?
the breadth of the oceans of my ignorance. I don't know what I don't know, and that informs most things of what I say on the internet. I think we have a crisis of confidence online where people are way, way too happy. This is ironically something I'm fairly confident on, so I won't caveat this.
Uh huh.
People are way, way too confident in making claims about anything. I have not read so much of the relevant literature of all the topics we've discussed about on this podcast. So someone's listening to this thinking, this is a person of authority. I can trust what they say. They've probably thought about this in extreme depth. I probably even having gone to like half the depth one would hope to think about, maybe not even 10th or 1%. So yeah, maybe it's kind of potentially slightly annoying, and it might seem sort of
I
like
don't mean to say
I'm
that. No, I
reluctant
wouldn't
to.
call it annoying.
No. I'm referencing myself here because I hear myself say it. But thank you for um, reassuring my nervous disposition. I. It also comes back to something else I said earlier, which is how the topology of my thought is informed a little bit by the philosophy of science and physics, which is the idea of Popper's falsification of critical rationalism. You've not got the true idea, you've got the least worst idea you've come up with so far. I don't think my ideas are right. I think they're the least wrong that I have, and so they're always pretty much room for improvement. And there's probably something I don't know, and Lord knows I change my mind on things, and hopefully I'll change my mind on things in the future. So it's always so far, and I think it's important to say that and reinforce it. It's kind of like a mantra to me. I'm not my opinions for most of the part, and yeah, online it annoys me when, and there's a reason for it. We incentivize it where people should be confident and say this is the way you should do XYZ. This is the best way to cook. This is the best way to lose weight. This is the
Mm-hmm.
best philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
This is the right ethical framework. And certainty is sexy. We long to have certainty and direction. And in the chaos of the world, God knows when someone says this is the way things should be, that's kind of reassuring, and people want to latch onto that. But it comes with huge downsides, and I think people get closed off to other options. And so yeah, I'm a big believer. I'm firmly believe in not being firm on lots of things. So
You use the word ocean to describe uh,
my
ignorance.
ignorance.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have thought in similar terms about, and I would use an ocean of depth of knowledge when I think about what those who have spent much higher percentage of their lives and much more time than I becoming an expert on any particular topic. I mean, I see this professionally. So my domain is uh, I'm on an engineering team. I have been since I've started working, and my depth is growing in this domain and my breadth as well. But if I then find myself in a conversation with someone who has specialized in finance or bids or sales or marketing or what would be another would be another domain within our company. Operational logistics, industrial engineering,
Yeah, infrastructure.
within,
Yeah.
right, or design within a very, very short time span. It becomes evidently clear that the on the topic at hand, if it's not that I'm presenting about engineering or something from my experience, I am I'm like playing chess with Gary Kasparov, and I could be ran circles around, and so that is humbling. But I think not with any negative connotation. I think being humility is a virtue, and so I think that's
It's
fine. I
wonderful.
think it's
Yeah.
a good thing, yeah, to be aware of just how profoundly more others can know about that which one does not.
The other thing I'd say is this: my friend's a maths teacher at a school in London, and I remember in his first year, he studied physics with me, and I said, "How are you finding it?" And he said to me, "Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, but something I've got to always remember is that I only need to be one page ahead of the kids in the textbook." Because he had to refresh ideas. He took a sort of year out,
Yep.
and they think I know everything. And that's something I always try and bear in mind, not only when I'm speaking to someone, which is that they may only be one page ahead of me in the textbook, but also when I'm speaking and someone's listening to me, where I go, I may only be one page ahead of you in the textbook. So you might think that I know all this more than you. Maybe I only know a little bit more. And actually, the territory that I haven't covered either would change my rhetoric on this. So it's also that of the unknown level of unknowns is a weird one, but it does inform how I
That's a very
communicate.
nice metaphor. I think that it comes across very clearly. Yeah, the one page. Who knows? If someone is one page ahead of
Well,
you,
when you
they could be
because
one,
it's
or they
always
could be
take
10,000 pages ahead, and you
if
can't
you're
possibly
playing
know.
chess against someone, it's your first chess game. Let's say they played 20 chess games. It probably feels the same as playing against a chess grandmaster. You don't
Right.
know
Right.
because it's the first game. So yeah.
Um,
But the last thing I'll say on that, I also think that's important
yeah.
because I don't want it to feel because you can do the other mistake of assuming that uh, that there's endless depths and that you still don't know anything really, and this sort of almost you can be so humble that you refuse to say anything, which I actually I think sometimes I make that mistake where I lean too far that way, and you've got people who don't give a damn who are talking on the internet incessantly. I think it's important to say that yeah you're not you don't know how much you don't know, but it doesn't mean that that's an infinite body of water or an infinite depth. It could be that all the knowledge you need to gain about something is very learnable, and then you actually can have mastery and full transparency on that. So the one page ahead metaphor, uh, yeah, you could only need to learn one more page, and then you get to the end of the book, or maybe it's 100. But yeah,
Switching gears a little bit, your most viewed, I think it was your most viewed video on YouTube is a review or discussion of the movie Ferris Bueller's
Ferris
Day
Bueller's
Off.
Day Off. Yeah.
Yeah, is that your favorite movie, or is that still your favorite movie, or
I have a poster of it in my. It's certainly one of my favorite movies. Yeah, I have a poster in my
yeah,
room right now. Yeah,
yeah. So why do you like that goofy movie so much?
I honestly, that was one of the videos I made during the sort of the year of bad art, and
Yep.
weirdly, it blew up in views 4 years after I posted it. It got about 50
Oh,
views and sat there for about 4 years, and then I
yeah.
don't know what must have happened. Maybe it was some sort of anniversary of the movie or something like that. But suddenly the YouTube algorithm went, actually, this video is pretty good, and decided to show it to however many people. Uh, why do I love that movie so much? I think I identify a lot with the character of Cameron. I'm naturally quite a neurotic, law-abiding citizen who would never break the rules in school. And when I watch that movie, I feel like Ferris represents this sort of, again, sort of ideal, this almost not nymph or elf. I'm looking for something like fairy tale of a character, uh, of living in the moment, of being laissez-faire, carpe diem, and I just find it's a sort of, I sort of non-rationally or intellectually, it's just a really good time. Like it's that's a smile on my face. It gives me a sort of a zest for life, and realizing, oh yeah, there's lots of adventure out there, and you can benefit a lot from breaking out of this routine. I tied it in the video with I'd read a book by Bronnie Ware which is fairly famous, where she talks about top five regrets of people. It's called Top Five Regrets of the Dying. She'd worked as a palliative care nurse, and according to her, there were these common threads among the utterances of people who are near the end of their lives. And it sort of, I read that, and I watched the film again recently, and I sort of went, oh yeah, actually, in many ways, this sort of film seems to resonate with the themes of that book. So it was, honestly, that video was just an experiment. It is a film I love. I was trying to articulate why I love it. Yeah.
You mentioned identifying with the character Cameron, and then you referred to him and you referred to the character of Ferris Bueller with reference to this like category of archetypes. Like this character represents something about the human experience. I've had that human experience, and so that's why I identify with that character. Are you familiar with the literary or well, the
I know what you mean
descriptive
by archetypes,
category of
yeah.
archetypes?
Yeah,
Yeah. What is it about the archetype that Cameron embodies that is why you say you would identify with that character?
in, at least as I see him depicted in the movie, because who knows how many actual minutes of screen time he has. I think he's on screen for about half the movie. I think we first see Cameron. He's in bed. He thinks he's ill. He lives in a. And this is not necessarily. I'm just describing his character. I'm not saying this is all one to one, but he thinks he's ill, or at least he feels sick. He lives in a home with parents who sound like they're very strict. We never see them depicted in the movie, and he sort of goes along with Ferris's idea of skipping off school, mostly out of peer pressure, I think, to begin with. But he's far more worried about getting caught on this day off than Ferris is. And one of my favorite interpretations of the movie is that Ferris sort of realizes that Cameron's like suffering from depression, and that he's actually in quite a dark place. And Ferris sort of uses this day to sort of catapult Cameron into realizing into some sort of sense of strength of character, of realizing actually the worst possible thing that you think is going to happen, you can survive this and you're stronger than it, and then I don't want you to live in fear of this anymore, this sort of fear hanging over your head of authority and of punishment. And why do I think he represents the archetype? I don't know if I could put a name I'm sure there are different sort of like archetypal systems. It's been a while since I read Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. I'm not sure if that's what it's called. Was the myth of the face of the hero of the thousand faces? That's one of them. But yeah, I think he depicts a young, neurotic, concerned man worried about the future and not very happy in the present. And I think some of that neurosis is self-imposed and can be transcended through.
I would argue he represents
courage.
also a real person. The character of Ferris Bueller is sort of ridiculous.
Yeah, he's an ideal. Yeah, he's exactly.
Not,
no, exactly.
yeah.
But he's meant to be. He's meant to be for sure.
Yeah.
And even in the film, it acknowledges that. There's a moment where Cameron's talking to his girlfriend, and like she's like, "What do you think is going to happen to him?" He's like, "He's going to be a fry cook." Like this is not a model of success. But I think it's as like a one day off. It's an important element to keep in mind. We can't live every day like Ferris Bueller, but I think we can take elements of that and it can enrich our lives a little bit. Maybe
I would share, and maybe you've heard this before. One of my favorite quotes is Chesterton: "Angels can fly because they take themselves lightly." I first heard that
I didn't know that.
articulated by Stephen
nice.
Fry. Yeah, in a debate that he participated in. I just think it's lovely, and it's a reminder to it's the same reminder. I think it's the same reminder that Ferris is giving Cameron. You're not
levity,
flying
dude.
because
levity.
Levity.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And there are Lord knows there are enough actually heavy things in life, and sometimes, because I occasionally speak to students and do presentations at schools, and among people and kids, it makes sense. Like they're worried about admissions. What the hell am I going to do with my life? Oh God! And they get it because it's the biggest thing they've ever had to look at in the future. And it's really hard to transmit this the simultaneous message of you should take this seriously, but also you look back on this and like that maths test you're worried about, you won't remember it. Or that French exam, or that time you didn't hand in the homework. Like the little things will turn out to be super small in the rearview mirror, but it's very hard to convey that
perspective.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Did I assume that that's your favorite movie, or is it truly your favorite movie?
I think in the video I say it's one of my favorite movies of all time, and that remains, that's still true years later. So no, I think I wouldn't say, I think if you would narrow me down on a number one, I don't think it would be the
Yeah.
number one spot, but it'd certainly be in the top five, top 10. Yeah, yeah.
My favorite movie, that's just I'll watch this over and over and enjoy it every time, is When Harry Met Sally, which is a
Oh, it's one
kind
of
of
my favorites
older
too.
rom-com.
Yes, genuinely.
Okay,
No,
so
no,
you
no, no. I know that almost verbatim. I was genuinely one of my top five as well. 100%. I swear on my life. 100%.
that's stellar. That's stellar. It was the only movie I had on a disc for probably 5 years or so, and I used to have a laptop that I could play it on, so that's what I would watch when I was in the mood for chilling and watching a film. It's got, I mean, just the aesthetic of the um, the
New
Armstrong
York and Autumn.
jazz and
Yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah. Harry
absolutely, yeah.
McCormick
I was thinking
Jr.
the
doing the
music.
soundtrack.
Yep,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah,
yep,
yeah.
stellar. My wife's favorite movie is, tell me if you've seen it, Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. Have you ever seen with
I've never seen Mr. Mogwai's Wonder Emporium. No, I don't know what
It's a
that
great
is. I'll write that
title.
down.
It was not received, I think, with as much I don't know, renown or
Fanfare.
praise as, yeah, it didn't, it has sort of a cult following, I think. But it's yeah, Natalie Portman and is it Dustin Hoffman? Philip Seymour
Oh, great
Hoffman?
cast.
Dustin Hoffman,
All right,
I
I'm
want to
gonna
say.
Mr.
Um,
Megorium's Wonder Emporium. Bad.
yes, yes. And it's just it's visually beautiful and it's magical and the reason I guess to relate to recent conversation it would mention is it also has the dynamic of a realistic character and a fantastic character
Yeah.
who is trying to show the realistic character magic. And in this case, real, you might visualized embodied magic, but one could take away metaphorically just the magic of life being here. Yeah. It's not too long either, so if you ever have a spare hour and a
I'm
half.
soon to take a
Great movie.
staycation, so I may actually throw it on. Yeah.
Great. I mean, I am considering going back to school, but at this point in my life, that would be giving up a lot. I mean, I make money that goes towards
Yeah.
our livelihood and our mortgage, and we're talking about having kids.
With kids, yeah, I was gonna
And
say, yeah, yeah.
so to go back to school is to give up a lot of money that could go to some very important and useful things. Since
What
you've
would you
pursued,
study?
oh, definitely philosophy of some kind. Philosophy, or I thought at one time psychology, with the idea being the thing to study would be agreement and disagreement and what's really going on at a deeper level when we try to convince each other of things, trying to cross the what may be a uncrossable barrier of how to convince another human being of anything when they're strongly disposed to an objection. Yeah, that's what that would be the only reason to go into psychology. But otherwise, I think philosophy, either philosophy broadly or with the express, with let's see, I wrote a cover letter at one point that I never submitted to anyone. The idea was we probably have humanity, we as in the human population, have created enough tools. I would say both ideological and I don't know. I want to use the word real, but let's say material or technological
Yeah.
tools that we should be able to solve all the problems that we have. And so the project of the degree, and so maybe I'm misunderstanding like what a degree is really able to do, but I would want to formalize in an educational setting that argument, looking like what there's humanity,
What's
there's
stopping
humanity's
us, dude?
future,
Yeah.
what are the problems, and what is stopping us from rising to the challenge of solving the problems. Yeah, which I think should be substantiated philosophically. So that's kind of what I would do.
That's actually a great thing of like what is stopping us, like really, because everyone would probably, I think a lot of people would say like greed or something like that. Can I recommend you one more book, which is sort of,
Please,
I think
I would
would
love
be
that.
related to that. There's a book called "Don't Talk About Politics" by an author named Sarah Stein Lubrano, and the book.
Do you know how that's spelled? I can look it up.
Steinlubano, Lubrano.
Thanks.
But I think it's the only book. I think it's the only book called "Don't Talk About Politics." Uh, the thesis of the book is to say, hey, in politics we have this idea of a marketplace of ideas, and we think that if we
Mm-hmm.
talk enough, we'll land on the right ideas. There's overwhelming evidence from psychology that that isn't fucking how things work at all, and so, um, which is kind of like bad for the whole rationalist. Let's consider all the options project. And she cites like a lot of different research from different fields, basically showing that things like big debates don't actually sway ideas, and that people are
Mm-hmm.
very
Mm-hmm.
resistant to changing their political views. And it's been a book I've been thinking about a lot recently, because to that end of we have the tools both ideologically and technologically. What's stopping us? It's she at least would say it's not a lack of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the antidote.
Mm-hmm.
What the antidote is, I don't know. But that book, I think, gives a negation of what would have been perhaps one of my instinctual answers years ago, of saying, well, maybe we just need more educate, more. We need to talk more. She's like, no,
A very popular
fail.
online commentator. He has a podcast. You've probably heard of him, Sam Harris, uh, Four Horsemen of New Atheism. You know, he has this through line, uh, which is all there is conversation. We have to keep having conversation. When we stop having conversation, and this is applied to the domain of religious belief and action based on belief, and I think in his case, but we could apply it to many domains. Yeah, you did this precisely. Yeah, the idea is when conversation stops, all that's left is violence. And
Yeah,
so having the perspective of wanting to use that, I think many people have, maybe most people have, wanting to use the time that we have available to us to leave this existence better than we found it. Um, the idea, yeah, I don't know. The idea that all there is conversation is attractive because it implies that you can have ideas, share them with other people, and maybe that will make the world better. And so I will look into don't talk about politics, but I'm apprehensive. I'm a little scared to have that idea challenged. That
yeah.
it's going to take something more. I don't.
I think she's so, and I've seen her speak on this. She does say, "Hey, look, there's kind of an irony in that I'm using conversation to try and convince you of something, to say that conversation is not great at convincing people of something." She isn't advocating for violence. One of the things, let's to give you an example, she says that if you want to change people's political persuasions or affect them politically, one of the more effective things, aside from just talking to them, is doing shit, as in building communities, working
Mm-hmm.
with them,
Mm-hmm.
creating what she calls social infrastructure and ways for people to actually build connections, which broadens their circle of their sphere of concerns, which affects how they vote and how they behave politically. She said in the talk I saw her at, she said, the marketplace is wrong because it's not that you have ideas, it's more that ideas have you. Ideas dictate your behavior. Ideas possess you. You don't go and shop for the nicest idea. Oftentimes people will hold ideas that make their lives worse, in the sense of like they will make less money, they will be less happy, right? If you're looking from a marketplace standpoint, being an atheist doesn't make any sense. You live less time, on average less happy, in order so you have less access to sort of like established global community in most cases. That's kind of a poor purchase, but these ideas possess us. So
Mm-hmm.
she does offer things between speech and violence, I suppose, if that's any reassurance.
Definitely interested, and we'll look into. If you've got the time, I think I will pose one more idea and
Shoot,
see what
man.
you think
Yeah.
about it, and then maybe we'll wrap up. So what you've reminded me of is the first video that I made, which from a content creation perspective is, I mean, it's out there, but maybe it should stay buried. But I think the idea is good. Is I was trying to answer the question, why do this? Why do anything ever? That was the question, and the essay was the answer. And my conclusion, I guess, was that the reason to act is not the right question. The question is answered by deciding to do something. So, two questions. Why do anything, and why do this particular thing? When we answer, and we must, the question, why do anything in particular, and then we do it, we answer the question, why do anything ever? And that's kind of
It's
bootstrapped
quite
from
elegant. Yeah.
I appreciate that. That's very kind. It's kind of bootstrapped from like try not doing anything, see what happens. And of course, we have the stream of consciousness. We have biological urges. I would extend that, and this is the relation to what you've articulated, to that we should be able to claim that what is good for us. Let's index that not transcendentally, but for human beings are meeting fundamental needs, and I think most people agree with this. So abating hunger by expanding access to food, abating disease by expanding access to medicine, and expanding our advancing medical
Hygiene and
technology.
everything else. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
So I guess from the perspective of someone with more philosophical education and experience than I, do you see anything wrong with that, or would you agree that we can put our foot down and say that what's good for people is meeting people's needs? Maybe not only, but
I don't
certainly
want
in
to.
part.
I don't want to sound like Jordan Peterson here, but what do you mean by good? Yeah, I mean, in like conversationally, I'd say yeah, of course. I don't think anyone's gonna disagree with that. I think most people seek out to meet their basic needs, and if you can help them, then you're also helping rational, autonomous beings achieve their ends. Which, and if you help other people achieve their needs, then that's like a net good for society. Because I think most people are net good, and from a sense of if everyone's got their basic needs met, then from an economic standpoint, it also potentially frees people up to do more interesting and valuable work. If like really bright people aren't worried about whether they'll eat tomorrow, then they get to study art, astrophysics, medicine, music, and that enriches culture and the lives of everyone. So yeah, if I've got the pedantry philosophical part of my brain, I'm gonna have to go, what is good? Who am I to do this? And go through all those sort of loopholes. But
Mm-hmm.
conversationally, yeah, of course, for sure. I think if you think life is worthwhile, and that people are net good and worth looking after, and that we're all in this together, then yeah, helping people meet their needs is a phenomenal use of time. And if anything could be called morally good, I would hope that would be included.
And then it's like, why are we sitting talking about these ideas instead of doing something that provides value to human beings in terms of
You
their
can
more
do,
fundamental needs?
but
But
yeah,
yep, yep.
I think you can do. There's a mix. You and I can contribute value to society in a variety of different ways, as does everyone. And I think if you, I hate this whataboutism that you can apply to so many different things. Well, we're also talking about things. We talked about some things now, which if you had to sort of rank order the most important conversations to have on the planet, might not be up there, and that's okay. That's okay. I think you can still be in the green, even if you're not in the deepest green. So.
What else besides abating hunger, extending health span, do you think are good things? And what are some
I
things that
mean,
you think are bad?
alleviating suffering, I guess.
Alleviating suffering.
So that's probably there. I think yeah, I mean, if you, there's, in some sense, I think pain medications are miraculous, right? You see people who are in hospital, and whether it's palliative care or they've broken a bone or something like that, it's really hard for me to, especially if you've been in that experience, maybe having intense pain at some point in your life is quote unquote a good thing to have in that it may give you a deeper appreciation for like other non less painful moments. I don't want to come at this at a sort of hedonist or utilitarian point of view, but there's a certain point where suffering is just needless, and yeah, so I think that's awesome. Other net good things. This is all just going to come from my sort of intuitions, right? I don't have any sort of proof of this, but uh, yeah, I think in fostering cooperation, uh, uh, spending time with loved ones. I don't know. It's all gonna go very sort of like empty platitudes. Uh, generating knowledge, just allowing people to spend their lives as they want. and providing a safe, fun, resource-rich environment to do that. So,
Last question. I
sorry, it's not very
mentioned
personal.
that we're thinking about having kids. What
Yeah.
is the one piece of advice you would give to someone, a soul who has not yet entered? I don't know if you believe in souls or not. I don't know if I do. But
Yeah, yeah, no, sure. Yeah, I
imagine
completely
my
agree. Yeah,
kid
yeah, yeah.
exists in some
Yeah,
ethereal
souls might
domain,
exist. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, souls
and
might exist. I don't know.
when they first arrive into our domain of existence, to the world, and they have a human experience ahead of them, what's the one piece of advice you would give?
Is this your kid specifically, or is this just like a soul that's going to be born? I'm
My
sorry
kid.
to be
I'm
pedantic with
looking
this.
for
Your kid.
advice.
Oh man, I don't know. And be nice to your parents. Probably. I guess I would say, right? Uh, well, maybe I'll say this, which is I think it's more advice for the parent really, but uh, I was lucky enough to be born to a set of parents who I'm also friends with. I guess there wasn't a sort of a sense of like dictator and subject or benevolent dictator and subject. They were also my friends. So uh, and I know in this I couldn't give this advice to everyone because a lot of people just don't have this option because of various reasons. There and the parent I think dictates most of the relationship. But I would say something along the lines of you also get to from an early age shape the relationship you have with your parent, and being friends with your parents is awesome. So
Thank you very much for your time.